what's up, bro? I'm here to be your flight instructor, cause you showed up to the flight school and asked them hey, I want to become a pilot, and they were like, hey, yeah, you totally should. You can go work with this guy, he'll train you. And so because you didn't know any of the right questions you should have been asking to the flight school or to interview a flight instructor or a CFI, now you got me, and it's gonna be great. We're gonna spend so much time together, way more time than it actually should be. But you're gonna pay me a ton of money for really mediocre instruction for about the next 60 to 80 hours. Oh, sorry, that thing's my baby mama calling. Let me get that real quick. I'll call her back. But either way here, it's gonna be awesome. So I know you want to become a pilot, and I can totally help with that. So will I give you a lot of mediocre instruction over the next 60 to 80 hours, maybe 100 hours? I don't know, it'd be great if it was 150, because you're gonna pay for all those hours to make me a better pilot, so I can go to the airlines and fly big airplanes and get more stripies. I love stripies, man. It's great. So it's gonna be a super awesome time together, you and me.
No.
What do you mean, nah?
That sounds horrible.
Well, you see, you probably should have watched that video. I know it's kind of a long one from Flight Mike Alpha. They kind of tell you all the questions you're supposed to ask a flight instructor, a CFI, in the flight school before you actually start paying them a bunch of money so you can choose the right one, so you don't end up, with me.
Well, as a new student pilot, I didn't know the questions that I even should be asking.
Okay.
I definitely don't want you as my flight instructor.
Okay.
Are you saying okay or asking a question in Spanish?
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna go watch that video now and figure out what questions I need to be asking to make sure I don't get you as an instructor.
Okay, you'll be back. They always come back.
Now, I know you're probably thinking that flight instructors would never be that bad. You would never find that terrible of an instructor out there. But the key here isn't that they're really that bad out there. The simple fact of the matter is, you as a brand new pilot, or even an experienced pilot perhaps, getting future ratings or additional ratings and certificates, may not know the right way to really choose the right instructor for you that's going to get you through as inexpensively, quickly, and overall get with the best education as possible, right? So those three things. We want it fast, we want it cheap, and we want it good. It's really hard to get all those three things, but we're going to give you some steps, some questions that you can ask, some very calibrated questions to ask when you're interviewing a flight school or a flight instructor, whether you're going for your private pilot certificate or perhaps your commercial pilot certificate or whatever rating you're actually doing. Now, when you walk into a flight school, obviously, you are looking for someone to train you to become a pilot. So there's three things you're really looking for. Someone who has the knowledge to teach you. Well, most of those people do. Even this guy in the video, right? Probably knows how to fly an airplane. Now, you're also looking for somebody who has the knowledge and the skill in communication and education to transfer their knowledge to you. That's where we get lost a lot of times. So it's really hard to find a good educator who is both a good pilot and a good educator. And then third, another thing that's kind of a rare quality to find is a person, an instructor, who actually cares about you, the individual, and doesn't just care about making money and getting flight hours for themselves. So we want somebody who knows how to fly, who can transfer that knowledge to us, and who actually cares about us as an individual and wants us to succeed in our aviation goals. So here are some questions that are going to help you find that person, regardless of where you're at in your aviation career. First question we're going to go ahead and ask is, how many hours of dual given do you have? Well, what's dual given? It's really important to ask that question first because it'll help drop the BS salesman pitch that they're giving you, because you're asking a very calibrated question that has a very specific meaning, right? So hours of dual given is a more technical way of asking them, hey, how long have you been an instructor? How long have you been doing this? And how many hours have you been teaching other students? So using the specific terminology, that specific phraseology, the correct phraseology, really important to show that you actually know what's going on here, and they're not going to try to BS you and give you basically some happy, fancy sales pitch to get you to sign up and start flying with them and paying them money. We're looking for the answer to be somewhere around 200 hours minimum. So if somebody becomes an instructor, they're going to fly at the most 60 to 80 hours a month when they're first starting out. If they're flying more than that, that's kind of scary. And if they're flying less than that, well, that's normal, but we're looking for somebody who has at least 200 hours of dual given, and preferably got that 200 hours of dual given over the course of 2 to 6 months. If they took them, say, 2 years to get their first 200 hours of dual given, they're not really instructing all that often. Obviously 200 hours over the course of 2 years is, I mean, just, kind of like, a few hours a week at most. So that's not really what we're looking for. We're looking for someone who's teaching a little bit more regularly than that, hopefully a few hours per day. Not 10 hours a day, but 2-3 hours a day, pretty good amount of time, 4 or 5 days a week, something like that. So that's the first question you want to go ahead and ask. Now, in all these questions that we're going to give you here and finding the right CFI, the right instructor, obviously there's a lot more to interviewing and finding the perfect instructor than we can cover just in this little YouTube video. You also have to find the right airplane for you, the right school, and interviewing a flight instructor is a little bit more involved than just these questions. To see all that other detail, there's a few links in the description below. The first link in there is to actually sign up for our private pilot ground school at fly@mikealpha.com. That link actually is for the gold level membership that will give you access to all of the courses on Fly at Mike Alpha. Yes, we do charge for that stuff. We have to pay our server fees and all this stuff. We want to give you this information and try to help you save time and money. We also have to pay our staff to make these videos and stuff. So there's that membership that gives you access to everything: private, instrument, commercial, CFI, tail wheel, seaplane, all that stuff online, Fly at Mike Alpha. The second link in the description below is a direct link into that private pilot course of that page that has all the information on how to choose a CFI correctly, how to choose the right airplane, how to choose the right flight school, all of that information in there. Now, even if you're going for your instrument rating or commercial pilot certificate, trying to be an airline pilot, whatever it is, and you want to know how to choose the right flight instructor, well, you'll want to go ahead and refer back to that course, because we hope that you've taken the private pilot course at Fly at Mike Alpha. Even if you are working on your commercial pilot certificate, you'll want to go ahead and reference back to that. And when you sign up for that gold level membership, that first link in the description below, that will give you access to all of the courses on fly@mikealpha.com, which will give you access to how to choose a CFI, how to choose the right airplane, how to choose the right flight school, and ultimately save a lot of time and money in doing so. Now, the next question we want to go ahead and ask here is, how long have you been an instructor for? Because we just asked how many hours dual given. We want to figure out what was the time frame. We just talked about how we'd like to see them get those first 200 hours within their first 2 to 6 months of instructing. So once they say, okay, yeah, I've been an instructor now for about 6 months, cool, that sounds great. The third question we want to go ahead and ask is, do you have a syllabus that you use with your students? And they'll say, yeah, sure, I have a syllabus that I use with my students. That's a good answer. When they say no, you can leave right away, because if they don't have a structured way to train you, your training is not going to be structured. It's going to be all over the place. And I don't care if they've been doing it for 20 years and they're like, I just cheat you out of my head. Things are constantly changing in aviation. The rules change, the standards we train to change, they evolve, and we want somebody who's staying up to speed on that. And the only way to really make sure that you thoroughly train a student from A to B, there are so many things to learn, whether you're going for your private pilot or commercial pilot license. There's so many things that you have to use a syllabus, you have to use some sort of checklist, and you want to see that when you're interviewing your flight instructor. Not that you're going to understand anything that's on there, and that's totally okay. The simple fact is, A, do they use one with their students? B, can I see it now, please? And if they say, oh yeah, it's somewhere around here, I'm not quite sure, but it's somewhere, then they're probably not really using it with their students, or not to the level that they should. Maybe it exists in some drawer somewhere, but they're not methodically, every time a student comes in for a flight lesson, checking off the boxes and saying, okay, here's what we've done, here's what we have remaining to do. And all too often, believe it or not, students go for check rides, their final driver's test, their final flight test with the FAA to become a pilot, and they ask them to do something on that test that they've never seen or heard of before. And they're like, why hasn't my instructor taught me this? And it's all too common to hear students say, my instructor never told me about that. And the examiner from the FAA says, well, I don't care. You're supposed to know it if you're going to be a private pilot or a commercial pilot, so you failed. Sorry. Go back to your instructor and have them teach you what they were supposed to teach you. If they had used a structured syllabus, then that wouldn't happen. And of course, the best syllabus you could possibly use is the one we have online for free with that private pilot ground school online at fly@mikealpha.com. So you can go ahead and download that as well. That is the third link in the description below, a direct link to that syllabus to go ahead and download that. And if your instructor that you're going to be working with, perhaps you have to work with a particular instructor and they don't have any sort of checklist or syllabus to use, well, then you can go ahead and download ours for free, bring that in, and that will help you stay on track and make sure you learn everything you need to when you're going through flight training. All right, quick little commercial break here to give you a little bit more backstory on why it's so important to be asking these questions in the first place. You would think that you walk into a flight school and they'll take care of it all, right? They're the experts. You just pay them money, you become a pilot, everything's great. We're trying to get you through flight training inexpensively, quickly, and with the best education possible. What is the flight school trying to do and what is the flight instructor trying to do? You would think all those same things, right? That's what a good company would do. But you have to understand there's a balance between good morals and capitalism. And there's nothing wrong with capitalism. In fact, it works really well. Free markets are the best way to go. But the free market has the flight school protecting their own interest, the flight instructor protecting their own interest, and you must protect your own interest. And that's what we're doing here, is trying to educate you so you can protect your own interest. All right, here's the deal. You're gonna become a pilot, minimum's 40 hours. National average is 73 hours. Some people take 80, some people take 100. That flight instructor most likely is a flight instructor because they're trying to build flight time to go to the airlines, to move on to the next level, to get more experience. So they bill by the hour, they get paid by the hour, and they get to put flight time in their logbook to help them move on to the next level when they fly with you. So if you take 40 hours, they make half as much money and half as many flight hours as if you took 80 hours. So if you take 80 hours, you paid double. That person, that flight instructor in that flight school, got to rent their airplane for twice as many hours, made twice as much revenue off of you. The flight instructor got paid twice as much and is now twice as much closer to getting on to the airlines, flying the big jet, and not having to deal with students asking a bunch of questions and annoying them all day long. Not all flight instructors become flight instructors because they love teaching. In fact, that's not the norm. Most flight instructors become instructors because it's the easiest way to build flight time to get from 250 hours, the commercial pilot level, that they've paid through all their training to get up to commercial. And now, if they become a flight instructor at 250 hours, they need to reach 1,500 hours before American Airlines, Delta, any sort of regional airline will hire them. To get to that level, that extra 1,250 hours, they don't have the cash to pay for that. It's a lot of money when you're renting an airplane at $100, $200 per hour. So what do? They become an instructor and they get paid to teach you while you're paying for the plane, and they log all that time to then go on to the next level. Nothing wrong with that, but just understand what's in their best interest. They may be like, hey, I want to get this guy through quickly, inexpensively, and with a good education. But I'm tired. I'm sick of students. I've been doing this for like 6 months or a year. I'm a little burnt out. I'm pretty close to going to the airlines. I'm going to be leaving here soon anyways. And gee, if I got just another 30, 40 hours, I could be out of this place. Instead of making crap money and wearing this goofy little monkey suit, I could be on to the big leagues, flying the big boys. So you know what? I'm not going to really study up and prepare as well as I should for this student. He'll show up, he'll pay the bill, and the more time I can fly with him, and oh yeah, you know what? Those landings are good, but we can make them better. And they keep flying with you a whole bunch because they're not following any sort of set syllabus like we're talking about here. They're not following any sort of set parameters to teach you by. And so it's just kind of make it up as you go. And all of a sudden, before you know it, it racks up a lot of time and money and expense for you, and racks up a lot of time and money for them, which is great. And the flight school, their boss isn't even complaining because the boss is really just making money when the airplane's being rented. So that's not always gonna be who's looking out for you. Who's gonna look out for you is you, all right? We're trying to look out for you by giving you this information. Not that this is going to happen at every flight school. Not that you have to say, oh, this is gross. I don't want to be a part of aviation. I'm not going to bother becoming a pilot when it works like that. That's terrible. Well, come on, seriously. Like, when have you ever not vetted a plumber before they came to your house? You just call up a plumber and you're like, oh, hey, can you come fix this? Oh, it's $25,000. That sounds great. Go right for it. Oh, the bill's $39,000. Okay, great. You don't do that. You don't go and build a home and choose a builder just because they say, oh yeah, I'll build it for you super fast and cheap. And then guess what? It doesn't turn out that way. You ask for some references. You want to see some examples of their work. All right, same thing here. You need to interview the school and the instructor and make sure you're looking into the airplane that they're going to be using to train you to make sure you're getting the best deal, a safe deal, and a comprehensive, good education out of the whole process without going broke doing it. Now, if you have a ton of money and a ton of time and you really don't care, then stop watching this video now. Just go on Google Maps, type in flight school, and pick the first one that comes up. They'll get you through and you'll become a pilot, I'm sure of it. Just don't mind the frustration and the extra expense and the extra time it's gonna take. So that's just a little bit of backstory here. Now, if after all that you're like, oh, I don't want to become a pilot, well then don't become a pilot, because honestly, you're going to need to have thick skin as a pilot and realize that this is no different than anything else you do in life. You don't go buy a car just because the salesman says it's a great car. You want to like run the Carfax report, right? So that's a little bit of backstory to hopefully educate you if you're brand new to aviation of why we're trying to bring you up to speed and asking all these in-depth questions when you think, well, hey, I should be able to just walk into a flight school and start flight training tomorrow. The fourth question to ask isn't so much a question, but it's really your impressions of the school. And when you first walk in there, how are people dressed? Are they professional? Are they courteous? Well, you want a school that's responsive. So someone who answers the phones, addresses your questions quickly, gets you lined up with a CFI relatively quickly. If they put you on a wait list for months, that school might be too busy to really deal with you. Plus, if they're really that busy, do they care about maintaining a super high quality? Because if you have a ton of customers, a ton of demand, and you're kind of short on supply, don't you just kind of raise your prices? And does quality really matter? When I go to Home Depot and I want to buy a 2x4 and I'm like, this 2x4 is crooked as can be. And they're like, yeah, well, too bad. Good luck buying it anywhere else. And I'm like, well, I guess I need that 2x4, so I'll buy the crooked one. You don't want crooked flight training. You want good quality flight training. So find somewhere that when you first walk in, you first make those phone calls, that gives you a good impression. But don't be fooled by the stripies, all right, and the silly little hats. So if they're wearing fancy uniforms and their instructors are all fancy and professional, those epaulets, the little stripes, the hat, none of that's going to teach you how to take off and land in an airplane. None of that's going to make you a better pilot, nor is it going to make them a better pilot. In fact, it's actually pretty uncomfortable and difficult to fly in those goofy little monkey suits. Don't be taken aback by a flight instructor who is wearing jeans and a t-shirt, or one who is wearing a fancy suit and tie and whatever. None of that's going to help you learn how to fly. So those first impressions, you know, they count, but not really. Don't be fooled by it. Also, don't be fooled by leather interior inside the airplane and a fancy paint job. That airplane could be a total piece of junk. It's not going to necessarily teach you how to fly any better just because there's fancy leather seats in it. All right, it might cost a lot more, and it may not even be a good, safe airplane. There's a lot we talk about in that separate series on the Private Pilot Ground School of how to choose the right airplane to train in. That actually goes into, hey, is the airplane safe and a good instructional tool? Nothing to do with, is the paint job fancy? Does it look pretty? Are your IG pics that you post with your selfies in that airplane gonna look cool? None of that really matters. We care about getting you through inexpensively, as quickly as possible, as inexpensively as possible, and with, most importantly, a good education. Personally, I don't really actually like wearing a uniform or like wearing those little silly stripes. It doesn't do anything for me. I've chosen to be an instructor, been an instructor for many years. I'm going to continue being an instructor for many years. And that's really the kind of person that you want to find, right? You don't want to find somebody who's like, oh yeah, I just became a pilot, I got this cool uniform, and I'm looking to the next job, looking for my next opportunity in aviation to move on up. You don't want to start working with an instructor who then quits and moves on to the next higher level job, flying the bigger airplane with the fancy uniform and all that stuff. If that's what they're really into, that's probably not the person you want to be working with. So don't discount someone who's just dressed like a normal person. Personally, I hate wearing uniforms. I'm not going to go work for the airlines or some fancy company that makes me wear a uniform. Just flat out not going to do it. I like just kind of being a little more casual, but I also enjoy providing the highest quality instruction possible. That's what you're really looking for, right? So that brings me to the next question to ask. Ask that instructor that you're interviewing, hey, what are your goals for the next 2 years? You don't want to ask them like, hey, are you going to quit on me when I'm halfway through flight training? Because they're going to say no. But if you say, hey, what are your goals for the next 2 years? If they say, well, I'm going to be at the airlines in 2 years, that's a big red flag. Oh, cool. You know, and you've been instructing for a year already, and what are your goals for the next 6 months? Well, I'm interviewing at some airlines. That's a huge red flag. Are you really gonna get through flight training in 6 months? I know they told you it was only gonna take a month or two, but life and other things happen. Maybe it's gonna take you 6 months. Some people take a month, some people take 6 months, some people take 2 years. You want to work with that same instructor all the way throughout training, preferably. Otherwise, when you switch instructors, that new instructor is gonna be like, hey, let's go fly around, see where you're at. Let me figure out where you're at. And they're gonna bill you for all that time. And then you're gonna have to kind of adapt to that new instructor. They're gonna have to adapt to you, and you're going to lose time. It's going to cause frustration, and it's going to cost you more time and money, because at the end of the day, you pay for the time you fly. It's not like, oh, sorry, Bill quit, went to the airlines, we'll set you up with a new instructor at no cost to you. Flight schools don't do that. So you want somebody who's gonna stick around a little bit. Ask them what their goals are for the next 2 years and hone it down. Hey, where are you gonna be in 6 months from now? Where are you gonna be in 12 months? If they tell you, oh, well, I'm interviewing at such and such place, but I'm gonna be local and I'm gonna keep instructing here part-time, I'll be able to finish up with you, even if I do get hired over there, that's a load of BS. Not because they're a bad person and they're trying to lie to you, because they might intend to do that, but once they get that new job and they're making money over there and they're like, hey, you know what? Training was really intense at that new job. Now I'm just going to kick it a little bit and relax. They're not going to have a lot of time for you. Also, when you get hired at a new company in aviation, training is very intense. You're not going to have free time for the first 2 months, 6 months, a year, or whatever, and you're going to lose your instructor for that time period until they finally get a better schedule where they have some time off and can come back and help you finish up your ratings. And any sort of delays in flight training that you can avoid are going to help you get through quicker and more inexpensively. Another question to ask is, how do you bill for your flight time? The most typical response you're going to get, or really you're going to get a pretty bad response that you don't really understand because it's kind of complicated. So this is a good time for you to test out what are their communication skills like. Can they actually explain somewhat of a complicated topic to you? And you understand it. You might not just jive with that person. Maybe the way they teach and explain things doesn't work for you. You don't want them as an instructor. Not that they're a bad instructor, but if you can't understand what they're explaining to you, then probably doesn't work for you. You should ask these questions not just to get the right answers, but also see how they explain things, explain this stuff to you so that then you can say, this person clicks with me or this person doesn't click with me, I need to keep looking. But anyways, how do they charge for their time? The most typical is you book me from noon to 2 p.m. as an instructor. We're gonna go fly for perhaps 1.2 hours of the engine running time. So 1.2 hours, 0.4 on either side of that lesson. We're going to brief, you're gonna show up, we're gonna say, hey, here's what we're doing today, here's some questions, how did your homework go that I assigned to you? And this is what you can expect in the airplane today. Cool, any questions? We're all good. Let's go hop in the airplane for 1.2 hours roughly now, or an hour. Let's say we pay the instructor $50 an hour. Well, we booked the instructor from noon to 2 p.m. We're gonna pay $100 for that instructor. Let's say we're paying $100 an hour for the airplane. Pretty much today with gas prices, more like $200 per hour. But easy math, $100 an hour. And we fly that airplane for exactly 1 hour. All right, so we paid $100 for the airplane, $100 for the instructor, $200 total, and really we were getting 0.5 in that example before and after of briefing time. 30 minutes before, 30 minutes after of briefing time. Might look something like 1.2 in the airplane, so you paid $120 for the airplane, well you still paid the $100 for the instructor, the 0.4 before and after the lesson. Now, if you booked from noon to 2 and you guys wrap it up by 1:30, you're not gonna pay that full 2 hours of instructor time. If you booked noon to 3 p.m. and you strolled in late and showed up at 12:30 or 1 p.m., don't be surprised when the instructor wants to bill you for that time because they were there waiting, ready to go. It's not fair for you to just pay for the time you showed up. If you're late, that's on you. They have to feed their family too. They're a professional, hopefully, that you're hiring. It's fair for you to be paying for that time that you booked and reserved with them. Next question to ask is, are you a full-time CFI at this school? Do you teach at any other schools? What other jobs do you have? Is this your only job? Just trying to get an idea of their schedule and availability. Ask them directly, when are you available to fly? 5 days a week? What days? Does it change? Is it always the same? Perhaps they only instruct at the one school, but maybe they're Mr. Mom and maybe they have kids that they have to take care of. Maybe they are only available weekdays from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. and that doesn't work for you. Or maybe they're only available Wednesdays in the evenings and then during the day the rest of the week because they have some other commitments, and that doesn't work for you because you work full time, so you won't be able to get out to actually meet them at the airport in a time that they're available. Ultimately, you want to aim to go ahead and fly at least 2 to 4 times per week. That means with weather cancellations, maintenance cancellations, schedule issues, COVID-19, whatever, that you'll probably be able to fly 2 to 3 times per week. If you're flying less than 2 times per week, it's going to take you longer and cost more money to get through flight training. If you're flying once a month, once every other week, you're going to forget information. It's going to take longer and cost more. If you are flying more than 4 times per week, that's a lot of information coming in your brain. Not all of it's going to stick. Some of it's going to kind of drip out and just fall out of there. So it's going to actually cost a little bit more. While you may get through it quicker because you're flying a lot, it's going to cost more, it's going to take more time, more flight hours. The minimum is 40 flight hours for a private pilot. Very few people do it in that. The national average is 73.1. And some people, because the national average is 73.1, are taking 80 hours, 90, 100, 120. Well, if you take 120 hours, that's literally 3 times the cost of doing it in 40. So your $8,000 license just became $24,000. This is why we're spending all this time trying to educate you to make sure you get through as quickly as possible, because that also affects the cost side of things to keep it inexpensive. Now we're getting into some of the most important questions you could possibly ask if you ask nothing else. These next few questions are going to be the most important. So, really key here. Not just how many hours of dual given have they given already to people, how many students have you signed off for check rides in the last 6 months? If the answer is 0, well, you're going to be a guinea pig. So you probably don't want to be a guinea pig when you're paying full price. Guinea pigs shouldn't have to pay full price for things, but they'll try to do that to you. The school, obviously, when you walk in and you're like, hey, I want to learn to fly, they're like, hey, Jim's available. Well, Jim's available because he's a brand new CFI and he has no other students on his plate. He has no experience, so he's available. That's who you get. If you walk in and say, I want your most experienced instructor possible, that's the best, well, they may not be as available, right? So just because they're like, yeah, so-and-so is available, and you're like, great, I thought it was gonna be so hard to find somebody who's available. Well, you're probably not getting the best one right off the bat. So ask these questions, do a little digging there. You'd like to see them sign off 2 to 3 students every 6 months for a check ride for the rating that you're seeking. What I mean by that is, hey, you want to become a private pilot? How many private pilots have you signed off and sent for check rides in the last 6 months? 2 to 3? Great. Oh, you signed off 2 to 3 commercial pilots in the last 6 months and no private pilots? Well, that's not ideal because I'm training to become a private pilot. I need you to be familiar with those standards and what the examiners are looking for at that level. All right. Now, if they have signed off a whole bunch of people, great. That's not a bad thing. If they're not signing off very many for that specific rating in the past 6 months, they're not going to be as sharp on those items to train you, and you're going to have more delays in your training, possibly not be as well prepared to actually exercise those privileges out in the real world and go fly around and be safe and actually have all the skills you need. Plus, you may not be very well prepared for the check ride. So really key, how many students have you signed off for those check rides? But even more key than that is, and how many have passed on their first try? You're looking for the answer to be 100%. Now, obviously, some people fail check rides, but there's really no reason to fail a check ride when you're adequately prepared. We have courses online on Flight Mike Alpha that help prepare you for that, as well as you should be working with a CFI locally that's going to help prepare you so that you never fail a check ride. Now, with that, if somebody says, oh, I signed off 5 students and 4 of them passed on their first try, 1 passed on the second try, I wouldn't run away from them, but I would, proceed with caution. If there's one that's available that's signed off, 5, 6 students and they've all passed on their first try, that's a lot better. You want somebody with a high pass rate. Now, the last question we're going to give you, and probably the most important, is going to be this. So you've signed off those students, right? You signed off 3 students in the last 6 months. That's awesome. Can I have their names and phone numbers and talk to them? Can I talk to some of your past students? Preferably the ones most recent, not ones from 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, not ones for a commercial or instrument rating when you're going for your private pilot, or if you're going for your commercial, not the private pilot students. You want to talk to the ones that actually did it with them at that level that you're trying to train to. So if you're trying to become a private pilot, talk to their private pilot students that have gone through training with that instructor. They should be able to give you those names and phone numbers. Maybe not right off the spot, because not a lot of people walk in with education like we're giving you here to actually ask these correct questions. So they may have to be like, oh yeah, let me ask so-and-so if that's cool. They should have their students' phone numbers and names handy. And you want to talk to those students and ask those students, how long did it take you? How much did it cost? Would you use that same instructor again? And then, okay, you just did your private pilot. Let's say they said, yeah, I would use them again. They were cool. Well, who are you using for your instrument training? If they were just a private pilot, that's what comes next. If they say a different instructor, ask them why. If they are just got their private instrument with that instructor, and then you say, who are you using for your commercial? And they say, well, I love that instructor, but now I'm using somebody different for my commercial. Well, why? The thing is, there's a special bond that kind of gets built between an instructor and a student at the private pilot level because they teach you how to fly an airplane. They are the one who teaches you how to fly this machine through the air and defy gravity. It's a really cool thing. And even if they're a terrible person who takes advantage of you and doesn't respect your time and money and doesn't give you the best education possible, and even if you fail to check ride, you still kind of have that bond with them. It's a little bit twisted, but you typically don't hear people saying bad things about the people who taught them to fly at the private pilot level. They'll have more critique for people who taught them at the instrument level or commercial pilot level, just because there's that little bit of a bond there. So do a little bit of digging when you talk to those actual past customers. That is probably the most important thing you can do. If nothing else, walk into a flight school and just say, hey, I want to become a private pilot. Give me 3 pilots that have trained here in the past 6 months. Give me their phone numbers and that have passed their check rides and are all done with their training. just go call them up and talk to them if you have no time to ask all the other questions that we just gave you. Now, there's a lot more questions to ask a CFI and a flight school about what airplane you're going to be using, what instructor you're going to be using. We don't want this video to be crazy long, so all of that is in the link in the description below. That second link in the description below will take you to that page in the Private Pilot Ground School. The fourth link in the description below is our free guide that has a few more questions that we covered than in this video. So there's all the questions that we covered in this video spelled out for you in writing, as well as a few more that you can ask, and you can download that guide for free. That is the fourth link in the description below there. If you have any questions, or if this doesn't make sense, or you're unsure of where you're at right now with an instructor, maybe you want to change instructors, you're not sure how to do that, any questions you have on flight training, you can always call us. It doesn't cost anything. Click on that very first link in the description below. It'll bring you up to fly@mikealpha.com. Our phone number is right there at the top and bottom of the pages. There's the contact us button. You can email us, you can call us. We're here to help you get through flight training. Ultimately, our goal is to make as many new pilots as possible. We do that through online courses. And those online courses, yes, some of them are available free, some of them cost money. Ultimately, we don't feel bad charging for our courses because we know that when you use them, they will save you so much time and money in flight training that they will more than pay for themselves. If we can take your training time from 73.1 hours of the national average down to 60 hours, we're saving you thousands of dollars. And so that $200 or $300 course you buy online at fly@mikealpha.com is more than gonna pay for itself. Plus, we are here as a free resource for so many other things. So feel free to call us, email us, go on fly@mikealpha.com, click the Ask a Question tab at the top of the page, and you can email us right through that link if you'd like. Any questions at all on this, please let us know. Any recommendations you have, if you already are a private pilot or you've already had some flight training experience and you have some recommendations for other students out there, please leave them in the comments below of what questions they should be asking, and let us know what your experience was like going through flight training, the good and the bad, some of the things that you want to avoid. You've got to think here, right? The flight school is in profit to make money. They have their own interest at heart. That's okay. That flight instructor is interested in building flight hours and going to the airlines. That's okay. That's in their best interest to make their hourly rate, charging you for flight instruction, and also build flight time. And so, do they want to see you get through in 40 hours in the minimum? Well, they're not going to get as many flight hours. They're not going to get paid as much if that happens. So what's in their best interest and what's in your best interest? Try to find something in the happy medium there. There's a lot more information that we go over in that Private Pilot Ground School that should help you kind of make sense of things. Don't be turned off by someone who is trying to build flight time and go to the airlines and charge for their services. That's fine, that's capitalism. There's nothing wrong with it. Just understand that you're going to have to be looking out for your best interest, they're going to be looking out for their best interest, and that's all okay. As long as you're educated and you've watched this video and you have this information, it's going to help quite a bit. Also, that fourth link in the description below, a lot more questions to ask. The second link in the description below, a lot more questions to ask about what airplane you're going to want to use and rent from the flight school, how to choose the school, and more questions on how to choose the CFI. Thanks so much for watching, guys. And if you cannot fly every day, then fly@mikealpha.com, and we'll see you guys in the next one.